Hello, welcome to another sound design tutorial. So in this video I'm looking at sampling because I think it's underrated as a creative technique. I'm always seeing people on the internet asking where can I get ambient pads, and the answer is you can just make your own. It's really easy. So I'll be having a look at some of the techniques I use to make sounds using Cardinal or VCV Rack. It's essentially the same thing, and then how we can just record these sounds, loop it perfectly, and then load it into a sample of your choice. So I'll be using Pigments because I bought it on sale and I quite like the sample engine, but obviously you can use a free software sampler, or you can use the one built into your DAW, or I'll also show you how to load it back into Cardinal and play it back polyphonically. So you're listening to a few I made earlier at the moment, but I'll look at some examples individually and then we'll have a look at the process for making the patches and recording it. Okay, so this is the first patch and it's basically a filter ping. So what you can do is you can excite a filter with a short burst of noise, and if you turn the resonance up and it oscillates and it basically produces a sine wave, and you can tune that to a musical pitch and it responds to volt per octave. So you've just got a few different octaves here, the note C. It sounds crap while you're making it, but then you sample it into Pigments and it sounds like this. So it's maybe slightly cheesy, that one, but the way it works is obviously when you play back at different pitches, the sample is playing back at different speeds and it gives you this really kind of thick ambient texture, which I quite like. So the next example is a bit more complicated. We've got a couple of the oscillators from the Surge XT collection, and there's also a lot of modulation. You can see there's about 6 LFOs in the patch. I think this sounds like a lot like the old wavetable synths from the 1980s, and this is how it sounds once we've imported it into the sampler. So I've actually put a lot of effects on this. The modulation engine is quite powerful in Pigments, and I've applied an envelope to the amount of effects send. So the longer you hold down the key, it basically starts looping the delay and it makes the reverb 100% wet. You can do stuff like that in Cardinal as well, maybe. Have a look at that later. Gets a bit much at the end there, to be honest. Okay, so this is the next example. This is using the Surge Twist VCO, which is basically Platt's, the hardware module for mutable instruments. And this is using the modal resonator algorithm. There's some really good algorithms on this actually for generating kind of interesting waveforms. And then this is how it sounds once it's loaded into the sampler. So again, we've got some filter envelopes on this. This is a good thing about Pigments. You can apply filters and effects. You can do that in Cardinal as well, so maybe have a look at that later. I think I've got the chord mode on here, so it's just playing minor ninths or something, different root notes, but it gives quite a nice effect. Okay, so this one's using the macro VCO, which is not polyphonic, but what we're doing is we're just copying the signal onto different channels, and then we're sticking it through polyphonic filters. And that gives you this kind of complex bubbling sound, which is a real favourite of mine, to be honest. I use this quite a lot. And again, there's too much reverb on this one actually, I might edit that later, but this is the patch in Pigments. Sounds quite dark again, this one. Seem to gravitate towards those kind of sounds, to be honest. But the beauty of this is you can make whatever you want. So if you don't like these sounds, I mean, these are my personal favourites. But you can use this kind of approach to make whatever you want. It's quite a thick texture again, this one, which is what I generally go for. Right, so let's have a look at how we make some of these patches. So I've got an instance of Cardinal open here. I've just got the host audio module and a mixer and a stereo spread, which spreads polyphonic channels. So this is actually really similar to my last tutorial, to be honest. All I'm doing is making a patch that plays one note, and then I make it polyphonic just to make a thicker, kind of more interesting sound. So there's actually a number of different ways you can do this. If you want a thick kind of analog sound, what we can do is just take an analog oscillator, just use the basic VCV one, and I tend to use a module called Unison, and there's a new one actually in the Surge XT collection which I haven't looked at yet, but this one's dead easy. All you do, you don't even need an input, to be honest. You can just take the volt per octave output and stick it in there, and then increase the number of channels. I'm going to set that to the maximum of 16. Make sure the volume's down here because this might be quite loud. And then if we take, say, the sawtooth output, and then you can hear as I increase this detune amount, you get a really wide sound. I've got the stereo increase there as well. So just take that back down, you can hear the difference that makes. So this makes a really wide kind of stereo sound with a lot of movement. I like quite a low amount of detune. If you put this up too much, it starts getting slightly out of tune for my taste. But a smaller amount gives you this kind of phasey sound with a lot of movement. So that's one way you can do it. I'll just unplug that for a second. I found if you're using kind of digital oscillators, this method doesn't work quite so well. What you're best off doing is just make the volt per octave input polyphonic. So I'm going to use a module called Polycon for this. And all we do, let's take the Surge Twist VCO, which is one I use quite a lot, to be honest, for this. And here's a really lazy method to just tune everything to C. What I do is take the quantum oscillator, and you can select the notes. So I just select the note C, and then everything's going to be in the right pitch, purely because most samplers seem to expect the note C when you load things in. You obviously can change the root note, but it's just kind of easier to record everything on the note C. So if I take Polycon and increase the channels to 16 and just randomize this. Now some of these are actually going a bit far, so you could just click on every single one and put it in the range you want, but it's easier probably to just get a VCA. This is going to be quicker. And put the polyphonic output from there into the VCA and then just take it right down. And what this will do is just give you 2 or 3 octaves, because you don't want too many different octaves, because when you then play up back different pitches, you're going to get stuff that's kind of too far out of range. So if we put that into the quantizer and then put the output into the volt per octave, so you'll see we've only got 5 channels there. Actually, let's increase that to the maximum of 16. And then you see on the output, they're all multiples of 1. So in Modular, 0 volts is middle C, I think. These are all integer values. So if you've got -1, that's an octave below. If you've got +1, obviously an octave up, etc. We've not got anything more than 2 there, which is good because you don't want too many different octaves. So if we just take the output from that into the spread module. You probably want to choose a different, let's try the wave shaper algorithm. Now the key with polyphonic stuff is to modulate it polyphonically as well. So if I just get an LFO, I'm going to mute that for a second because that just gets annoying. There's no VCA in the signal path there, so that just drones on forever. But if I also put the output from Polycon into the volt per octave, the LFO, that's going to make the LFO onto 16 channels as well. I'm going to put it in slow mode and then take the sine output and just start modulating stuff on here. Now let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's not brilliant, to be honest. Let's just choose a different algorithm. Wavetable is usually good for this kind of thing. Let's take the speed down on there. So you can hear that's a kind of complex sound that works quite well when you start playing it back through your sampler. And there's all sorts of things you can try. I find all of the surge oscillators really good for this. The window oscillator is quite good, and also the wavetable one. And there's also some really good algorithms on Twist VCO. I tend to use the filtered noise and particle noise quite a lot, and also the modal resonator, which I think is the same algorithm as rings, or at least it's very similar. It's obviously quite a famous hardware module. So there is one other method we can use here as well. If you've got an oscillator that's not polyphonic, so let's use something like the macro oscillator, which is similar to Platts, but it's older and a bit kind of rougher. Then what we can do, we can use another Bog Audio module called Polymult. And what this does is just copy things onto multiple polyphonic channels. So you can use this for CV or audio. What we're going to do with this, we're just going to take the audio output, because that's not polyphonic, that's mono. But we can then, if I just disconnect that for a second, take the output into there, and you can see that's just one channel. Then we can just increase this, and it duplicates it onto up to 16 channels. So obviously that's going to be the same thing on 16 channels, but then what you can do is you can get effects and filters and then modulate those polyphonically and get a more interesting sound that way. There's quite a few effects that are polyphonic. I'll probably do another video on that at some point. But let's just try a filter. I'm going to use the surge filter as well. You might have noticed I really like the surge collection. I think they're all really good. So if we take that into the filter, and then take the output back into the poly spread module. Let's have a listen to this. Okay, so we need to modulate that. And I'm going to take the sample and hold output. Let's just change the filter model on there. And I'll go for 24 dB. And turn up the resonance as well. And that needs a bit more modulation. So what we've got there now is a monophonic oscillator, which is going through a polyphonic filter. And then we've got different modulation on each channel. That gives you this kind of complex bubbling sound. I'm going to try bandpass actually, I think that's going to sound better. Yeah, there you go. Then obviously you can change the algorithm in the macro oscillator as well. That one's quite good. That's quite a bubbling kind of sound. I find things like this just make really good textures when you sample it and play it back. So that's the process really. You've got three methods there for making things polyphonic. What I do is just get one note, just a note C, and put it on 16 channels and try and make interesting waveforms. And then you just record this and just sample it. So let's just switch that off for a second. And this is how I loop things. I use Audacity because it's free and I'm a cheapskate. So let's just zoom out a bit. But a really good way to loop things perfectly. I didn't invent this, to be honest. I nicked it from somebody else, but it's a really cool technique. So you just select roughly half the waveform, just cut it, go back to the beginning, and then paste it. And then the end of your file, loop round perfectly to the beginning because that's where you cut it. But obviously we've got a big problem in the middle, and that's fine. You just select an area and you go to Effect and you do crossfade clips. And that smooths it out. Now you can't hear this because it's not set up to record the output, but you can see that that smoothed it off, and we've got a loop where you won't hear the join in the middle, and when it gets to the end that loops perfectly back to the beginning. And then you just export that and save that, and it makes a perfect loop. And then if we go back to Reaper, which is my host software here, and I've got a default instance of a Pigments patch, which is just playing a wavetable, I think. And then we just change this to sampler. Then we can choose some of the waveforms we made, so you can hear a few different ones here. Let's go with that one. And then once you've got that in your sampler, you can obviously apply envelopes, filters. I use this to make pads quite a lot. You can obviously use it to make lead sounds, bass, whatever you want. I'm just all about pads, to be honest. So straight away that sounds a bit more interesting when you start playing back different notes. I'm more of a guitar player, to be honest. I can't really play keyboards, but that gives you a rough idea. And then you can obviously add filtering and effects. Let's stick some effects on, and you can just hear what this sounds like with some reverb. Stick some delay on. So there you go, that's the basic process for getting your sounds from Cardinal into a sample of your choice. Obviously I'm using Pigments. Let's just have a look at how you can actually play back samples in Cardinal as well. So if I just go back into here and then just clear all of this. Okay, so I couldn't find a sampler that actually plays back polyphonically, but what you can do is you can take something like this. If I just load a sample into here, go for any one of these. And I also need the CV to MIDI, or sorry, MIDI to CV. So if we take the volt per octave into the tune input, and then the gate. Okay, so I've got this looped. That seems really quiet actually, just going to turn that up a bit. There you go, and that's just playing the whole time, so I'm also going to grab a VCA. And then we need an envelope to control the VCA. So connect the gate to there, and then connect the output to the CV for the VCA. And give it some release and a bit of attack. Turn the decay and the sustain up. This is your basic patch. To make this polyphonic, what we need to do is increase the number of MIDI channels. Right, so at the moment this is completely monophonic. So if we want this to be polyphonic, you need to right click on the host module and then increase the number of polyphony channels. So you can see that's mono at the moment. So let's go for 8. And then you just duplicate the sample module here. For some reason my keyboard shortcuts aren't working. Let's just get 3 of those for argument's sake. And then all you need to do is merge those. So we'll just grab a merge module. And you need to merge the outputs into the VCA. So just grab the output from each one. This is a complete faff, to be honest, but it's the only way I found of playing back polyphonically. And then to get the actual notes, you also need a split. So you can see there the volt per octave is polyphonic. And if we put that into the poly input and then just split out each channel to a separate module. So I've just done 3 here because I don't want to spend all day patching this. But you can obviously get as many voices as you want. And then hopefully now we can play 3 notes when I connect this up. So there you go. And once you've got that, you can obviously put this through your filters and effects and everything else that you've got within Cardinal. So there you go. That's a basic technique. Hope you found this useful. I'll put a few of these patches onto patch storage. I'm not doing all of them because I've got hundreds of these, to be honest. If anyone wants the actual wave files or the samples, give me a shout. Maybe upload those somewhere too. So hope you enjoyed this and found it useful, and thanks for watching. Cheers.